We have a very special guest here, and I certainly have dressed up for them. I'm really excited right now to welcome Jeff Passan to PitchCon right now. Jeff, thanks so much for taking the time and being here.
I'm so embarrassed. I'm never the underdressed one. I feel like we switched
You
uniforms
know,
and
somebody needed to do it. Someone needed to be here. Dressed up. I got you today. All right. So you look
here's
great.
the thing. Nobody ever needs to do it. People choose to be tryhards. And I have chosen to do so for more or less every day of my 20-something year baseball writing career. So to see it filtering down to the next generation, I love it. And let me just say, Nick, thank you for putting this entire event on. Organizing something like this is the truest labor of love, and doing so for the cause that you're doing it makes it even better. So from the entire community, thank you. We're all appreciative of your hard work and dedication to this really cool game that we all love.
Oh man, stop that, Passan. We should be saying that to you. This whole thing is a product of everyone involved, and I'm just really excited that I get to do it and get to host it and have so many, people like you that are just spending their time to do this, and we're really happy that we get to do it. Yeah, to raise money for ALS. We're hoping to hit that $10,000 goal. Where I think we're over a third of the way there, and we're just a couple hours into 55 hours of this. So
All right.
thanks to
Well,
everybody who is here.
Put me down. I'm not there yet, but put me down for another 1,000.
Oh
So
my God,
we're
Jeff.
now 40% of the way there.
That's incredible. Thank you so much, man. But yeah, let's talk about you. This is the life of Jeff Passan. And I've got a moment with Jeff just to figure out how the heck did you do this? How did you become this incredible beacon for us with baseball, and the way that you handle it is incredible. It's one of the things that I tell my friends and family about, that hey, I'm involved in baseball. I'm so lucky that the person at the top that we trust the most to spread the word of it is Jeff Passan. We don't get to choose that person, and we're really happy that it's you. And I remember, of course, back in the Yahoo days, then becoming the ESPN one, and just kind of overnight we blinked, and it's like, yeah, we don't trust things until Passan tweets it. So I wanted to digest that with you and kind of figure out how this works. And I wanted to really start at, I normally do these shows where I go back to you being like 6 years old. Where were you? And your first love of the game, the first moment that you might actually like this thing. And do you have that memory of just like, oh man, this baseball sport, this ain't so bad?
Yeah, I was on the kitchen floor actually, and it was a Sunday morning. It was every Sunday morning, and I would take the Cleveland Plain Dealer sports section, and I would flip back a few pages and end up on the agate page. Now, agate, for those who don't know, is like the tiny little copy that's in newspapers. A lot of times it's like a transaction page, stuff like that. My dad worked at the Plain Dealer, and later on in his career, like the agate page would be, his domain. But back then, Sundays in particular were fascinating to me because they had statistics for every baseball player, and it took up an entire page. They had it sorted by batting average. They had it sorted by ERA, and I would just pour through all of that information. And as a 6-year-old, it fascinated me. I didn't know how to process it because I was 6, and you don't know anything when you're 6. But still, I was transfixed by this idea that all of these players could be boiled down to a few numbers.
Right.
And the idea that who they were as a player could be represented in numerical form, and so much better in baseball, and so much more representative, I think, in baseball than any other sport. I mean, we know like the numbers are the lifeblood of the game.
Absolutely.
Like they tell us the story of where Major League Baseball has gone. And the proliferation of numbers over the last, we can go back to 20 years. In reality, it's more like 10 years to really, truly understand what's going on. I can't fathom how cool it is to be growing up now and to have access to all of these things that make our knowledge of the game so much richer.
Oh my gosh. I mean, really just you have StatCast data now that is available. And
Mhm.
for on our side, there's always an assumption of organizations just have so much more data and we're just like, don't try to make up stuff. They've got all the things and
Yeah.
whatever. And the fact that we are digging at the same rate almost that they are in some ways is so interesting that we can do something out here that actually does influence in there is, whoa, this is so cool because there's just so
You know
much.
what though? That's not new, Nick. That's not new because if you
Sure.
look
Bill
at
James, yeah.
the generation that came into front offices right after Moneyball came out,
Right.
like Moneyball inspired kids who wound up carving careers in baseball. I mean, they were coming from baseball prospectus and
Yeah.
they'd come from
It's true.
Fangraphs, and now they're coming from, Tread and Driveline. And the pursuit of knowledge is the common thread in all of these things. We're trying to understand them better. And if you illustrate that you have the kind of brain that can think creatively, and I hate outside the box, that's a stupid phrase, but can think creatively, intelligently, and more than thinking outside the box, ask the right questions. That's what
Yes.
we're trying to do here. You want to
Right.
ask the right questions. If you see a data set and it's speaking to you and you're trying to understand it better, asking the right questions, not just the what, but the why and the how, that's where you find greater knowledge. And every front office in the world wants people who are curious and driven and bring that verve to it that I think can get lost when you're dealing with data sets. I mean, we look at what the classic interpretation of somebody who who interprets data is. And that's just a nerd who's sitting there and has no social skills and is just as wonky as it gets. But the Hope Diamond of a baseball front office is somebody who can code and who can look through data and who can ask the right questions, and then in turn take his or her findings to the rest of the people in the front office and say, I think I figured out something that's going to make our baseball team better. And maybe it's better by 0.1%. The moonshot is that you have a 1% idea. But all in all, just finding people who care. Like, I'm not going to say that is a necessity, because there are people who are great at everything who don't care.
We might find some in Los Angeles, possibly right
You
now.
took the words right out of my mouth there. Yes. But if you can find that and you're in a front office, you feel like, you struck oil.
Right, absolutely. And really going back to what you were saying about how we are defining these players, they all have these numbers assigned to it. It's so special that we have so many different ways to define a player. And we just keep adding to that over and over again. And I actually have to explain why I like baseball to so many people, because honestly, outside of this world that we live in for ourselves and our career, I'm friends with everyone who just does not care about the sport. And I often get a moment to say, like, hey, this is actually what's really cool about it, and trying to find a way that isn't just like, cool, his CSW was great, or his his IV being his four seamer and all that kind of stuff. And what I found the
I'm
simplest
sure
way
they
is I just,
understand exactly what you're saying,
yeah,
too,
of
when you
course,
start throwing out alphabet soup like that. And
definitely.
here's the thing. I feel like a total nerd because I know exactly what you're saying. But sorry, go ahead.
But what I do is I normally take my phone and I go like this, like, look, this is the strike zone. The whole thing is that they have to throw this into this imaginary box. They go in and it's a strike. They don't swing. That's a strike. If it goes out of it, it's a ball. You get 4 of those. You go to first. And it's a really simple thing. Every single pitcher is trying to throw it into this box without the guy hitting it really far. But every single pitcher does it differently. And that is so cool. That, oh my, and like everyone has their strengths, everything, everyone has their weaknesses, you know what they are. And then we get into it, and then instantly it just clicks. They start to get that. They understand, like, yeah, there are different authors, there are different actors, there are different whatever, and there's different parts of each one that they like. And when you put it that way, instead of just like waiting for an event to happen, like, oh, did it go out?
Yeah.
No, okay, cool. That's when it starts, the gears start going. And it's such a beautiful thing.
it's why we not just love sports, but particularly love baseball, right?
Yeah.
Um, there are just so many different ways to skin a cat. There are no two identical deliveries, like not even close. There are
Hmm.
guys who may aesthetically look similar or remind you of someone, but every person delivers the ball differently. And I see this with my son, who is 16 years old and a pitcher, and has gone through just by himself more different deliveries than I can count anymore. Like I look back at
Right.
videos I took
Right.
of him when he was 12 and 13 and 14 and 15, and hell, even like a month ago,
Hmm.
he's dry throwing in our living room, and I was like, you shorten your arm swing a little bit, and he's like, yeah, I just want to be more efficient. I'm like, what am I raising? Like,
Oh, I
what am
can't
I
wait to see
doing
it.
here?
There'll be, maybe he becomes a hitter and actually we get a different kind of Passan bomb. That'd be pretty cool.
Oh, nicely done. He has worked on his swing this off season, and it looks a whole lot better. And
Oh man.
he is like, I will say this, the insider game tends to be populated by little guys. Not
Mhm.
always. John Heyman's a tall guy, but myself, Rosenthal,
Sure.
Morosi's not a tall guy. I somehow wound up with a 6'1" child. So he might not be
Nice.
mine, but he will not remind you of me if you see him. And he constantly, like, if he's feeling himself that day, just
Mhm.
walks up to me, bows up a little bit, looks down, and says 5'9". And I'm like,
Oh, that's great.
thanks, disrespect. It's
Uh,
real in the Passan family for generations.
so I do want to go back just a little bit to like, okay, how do you actually get here? And from that, newspaper on the floor, I assume, of course, you went to journalism school and then you got your first big break inside of the industry. What was that?
I mean, I was writing for local newspapers when I was like 14 or 15.
Hmm.
My dad worked at the Plain Dealer, so it is in the blood. And he didn't like push me toward it by any means, but he saw that I enjoyed it and helped cultivate it, and that was, the most important part of things. Like when you have that encouragement from your parents,
Right.
you believe you can do anything. I went to Syracuse, worked at the Daily Orange for 4 years there, went to Fresno, California, and worked at the Fresno Bee for 2 years. And then MLB.com hired Dick Cagle, the Hall of Fame writer, and the Kansas City Star had a job opening for a national baseball writer. And the guy they wanted to hire wanted 6 weeks of vacation, and they were only willing to offer 4. So they went with their number 2 choice, and that was me. And that was my introduction to baseball writing back in the
Amazing.
2004 season with the Kansas City Royals, who had great aspirations and ended up being, I believe, the worst team in baseball that year. They were really bad.
Oh my
Uh,
gosh. So I mean,
yes.
that must have been a really good training and then for you, right? You could feel like you could ease into it in that way.
There really was no easing in. I
Hmm.
mean, getting like, if you get hired to cover a beat, there's sort of the expectation that it's going to take you a year or two to get to know the players and the people
Yeah.
inside the clubhouse and the front office and all the people that you need to get to know. With the national job, I just had to I had to dive in, because if there was a big story, I was expected to cover it.
Right.
And because of that, I had to familiarize myself with people and practices very quickly. And there were a lot of folks along the way who really looked out for me. I mean, there were some who saw me. I still kind of look like a child now. You can imagine what I looked like when I was 23. The
Not a
reason by
chance,
the re-
Passan.
No, I mean, the reason why I wear suits in the clubhouse is because that first week on the job, when I was in the clubhouse in Kansas City, a player threw his underwear at me because he thought I was a clubby.
Oh, wow.
So I was like, you know what? I need to probably dress up so I don't get skivvies thrown at me
Yeah,
anymore. Like that's something you generally want to avoid.
sure.
But yeah, whether it was Bob Dutton, who was the beat writer at the Star at the time, or I remember Joe Christensen, who I believe at the time was working covering Baltimore Orioles. Like pregame, there's just an expectation that when someone's talking with somebody else one on one, you do not go up and participate and sort of ingratiate yourself into the conversation.
Right.
And I did that. And Joe could have turned around and said to me, "Hey, you little shit, get away. This is my time." And he would
Right.
have been well within his right to do so. But he was very thoughtful in the way he said, "Hey, this is how things work. Totally understand you're new at this, but just make sure to respect that." And I've tried to be very respectful to both fellow writers as well as the people who I cover, because it's the least that any of them deserve.
Right. So there's two things I got to mention really quickly, Jeff. One, how dare you curse? This is a family-friendly conference. And I'm just messing. It's okay. But that's what they want me
You
to say
got
in
me
the
for a
chat. And
second.
the second thing is they give you permission. They give you permission to pick up your phone, and they're all like thinking that that's some breaking news that you're just turning down for this,
Well,
which is
no,
incredibly touching.
that's rude of me not to have it on mute. So I apologize.
No, and it's quite or no, that's it's actually kind of exciting. It's like, oh my gosh, it's we're almost like seeing the sausage get made in that way. It's incredibly
Trust me,
fun.
it's going to ring more.
So I mean, on that topic, this is something that I think all of us on the outside don't really quite grasp, and I know you really can't talk too much about it, but what is that process like of like, cool, sources say this is going on? How is it that you have this information, you're the one that's funneling it out as opposed to anyone else?
I think it's a few things. It all starts with relationships, right? Um, and that gets built up over time, but people need to trust you, and they need to understand what your purpose and imperative is. And the way, whether it's meeting new people and trying to explain to them why, giving information to me as opposed to anyone else is a good thing, or just reiterating it with sources. Like my pitch has always been very simple. I want to be right. Like being right is not the most important thing in this job. It's the only thing.
Yeah,
And it's inevitable that I'm going to screw up. I have screwed up in the past. I'm going to do so again. I'm going to get something wrong. I'm going to get bad information. But what I try to do is ensure that my process is sound enough that when I do get bad information, I never put myself in a position where I feel like I'm compelled to print it anyway, or pressured by whether it's other reporters or anyone else to go out there with something.
sure.
And I think that has changed as time has gone on for me. When I was younger, it's not that I would be reckless or careless with the information, but the desire to get a scoop. Once I started pursuing news, and once that became like a big part of the job, it was important because of what it could portend for me. Like, hey, if I start
Yeah,
doing this news thing, more people will read the stories that I'm writing, and I will probably make more money, and that helps my family out. And so there are all kinds of incentives there that, if you're approaching things for ignoble reasons, could push you to, people chasing followers or stuff like that could push you to doing something wrong. And I think those misplaced incentives are a big reason for the amount of misinformation or just bad information that's out there. I
yeah.
think I
Hmm.
think the democratization of the internet is arguably the greatest thing that's happened in modern history, and it's also the worst thing that's happened in modern history, because I'm not going to call myself an expert because that's obnoxious. What I will say is that I feel like I'm a student, and I'm a student
Mm,
who spent a long time learning this industry and understanding the different machinations that are going on. And because of that, I may not be as compelled to run forward with something that may not be true or doesn't make sense, or that I haven't learned from a past mistake. Hey, like, this reminds me of that time where I totally screwed up. Let's pump the brakes a little bit, even though you're excited. Like yesterday, I got a text from someone that said a player was being traded. And I was like, ooh, this is going to be a good one. And so I started reaching out and, talked with 3 different people who hadn't heard, and then talked with someone who did definitively hear that it was not the case. This guy was not being traded.
Sure.
And so as much as you see me publicly, or at least on social media, putting these things out there, I can tell you right now, for every one that I break, there are like 3 that not that I don't break. There are 3 that I heard might have some legs to it. Nope, bad information.
Right.
And you just, it's why when I see some of the kids, and I'm sounding super old here, why I see when I see some of the kids who I adore the fact that they want to do this.
Yeah.
I wonder about their reasons for doing it.
Yep.
Is there reason to inform and educate the large group of people whose lives are disproportionately affected by what they read on social media about their baseball team? Or is it to try and build themselves up? And there's that very fine line between brand building and getting shit wrong.
Yeah. Again, Passan, you got the cursing. You got to be careful. You got to no. Okay, I'm just messing around. So about that is actually really interesting. It's really on the community more. Obviously, like, we would want to be a situation where we have that journalistic integrity and everybody has to follow that, and that's just a given. And of course, it's not in everything. There's going to be people who just do it for nefarious reasons, or they really abuse that. And it's on the community to really say, well, we're not going to listen to you.
That's, you know what,
right?
and that, I think that's such a salient point here. We've become much worse educated consumers of news.
Yes.
And
Absolutely.
and I think the consequence of newspapers dying, or gutting their staffs, I think the consequence of large figures in the public domain looking at reporters and journalists and demeaning them and making something like fake news into a real thing. I think all of those have made us dumber consumers of news. And there's also the inherent bias of wanting to believe something that positively affects us, right? So if you are a Yankees fan, and someone puts out there Blake Snell is going to be siding with the Yankees, you want to believe that to be true, because the Yankees rotation could use some help. So there's that as well. And the conundrum for me is, I want to suggest, like, valuing expertise or time spent doing this, or I want to say that, but at the same time, that looks kind of selfish and gatekeeping of me to do so, right? Because if you're not listening to people who are new voices, then all of a sudden, you get old, stale people in there who just aren't very good at it anymore. And that's the lot of it. And you don't want that either. And so I'm not going to suggest that people keep actual scorecards here, but when it comes to news, trust the people who have delivered it to you before, but keep your eye out also for those who may be new and at the beginning of their careers, or burgeoning in this industry, who show levels of accuracy and restraint and clarity. Like, those are 3 of the pillars that I think go so far in being a newsbreaker and doing it in a way that has integrity. And that's where I have tried to focus more and more on that in recent years in the way that I go about my reporting. And I think it
Mm.
resonates with the people with whom I speak and those who are kind enough to allow me to know what's going on.
I think a lot of the chat will agree with me, where I literally have notifications for just one person, and it's Pitcher List. No, I'm just kidding. It's Jeff Passan, of course. But actually, to that point, I think one of the elements that is really difficult, considering it's such a digital community now, is earlier in your career, it was a lot more about the personal relationships that you had with others inside your field. So that when you were trying to get your first feet underneath you, you had other people that you knew physically, who then you can have rapport with, you can have respect with, that you were lucky that they trusted in you because they could see you and they can actually understand you a lot more. And it's not that you don't want to give that back to the newcomers and everything. That it's hard on your end
Oh
too, I
no,
imagine. Who are these
I
people?
do
We
though.
don't know their intent.
Yeah, no, I do know. And
Mm,
there are some younger reporters who I have a ton of respect for because I think they go about things the right way and I
sure.
think they care. And it's not because they solicit advice from me that suddenly I feel like they're more worthy or
Oh, I
anything.
don't mean it in that way. Yeah.
Right. It's because they ask the right questions, though,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
because they're interested in the right things. Now, this is something, and I'll sort of just take you behind the curtains here a little bit. This is something that I've only started doing within the last few years, but I think that it I think it reflects where I am in my life and what my priorities are now. And it's very easy for me to say the number one priority in my life is not getting a scoop because
Mhm.
thankfully I have enough where I'm just very comfortable with myself. And when I lose, I know I'm going to lose. Like it's bound to
Sure.
happen. Ken Rosenthal is really, really good, and you should have notifications on for him too.
Yeah, I think I actually do.
And Joel Sherman is really, really good, and you should have notifications on for him too. And Mark Feinsand is really, really like,
Yeah.
and Robert Murray, one of the younger guys who I was talking about. Robert's fantastic, and uh, you know, I used to, when I got information, like when I got a trade that was going on, I used to just like, if it's right, put it out there. And I understand. I don't think it is journalistic malpractice to go and do that. I don't. I think that is a perfectly fair thing to do. If you have facts, if you have information that is correct on something that's going on, if you put it out into the world, then like, cool, totally
Right.
cool. But what I recognized is when I saw somebody talk about learning news of their trade on Twitter, I was like, that's a really bad way to learn about a seminal
Yeah.
event in your life.
Yeah.
Like it's not right. It's not something that I want to be involved in. And so when I hear about a trade now, I will reach out to people and say, has this person heard?
Oh,
Has
that's
this
great.
player heard? And a lot of time, like I will lose trade scoops because
Mm.
because I waited. And I
Wow.
go to sleep every night so comfortable with myself because the process is right and it's thoughtful and it's human. And that is all we are in the end. We are
Hmm.
people inside of this crazy sport that has all sorts of incredible things going on. But at the end of the day, I don't want someone finding out a life changing event from somebody sending my tweet to them. Like
Sure.
that's
Oh,
it. That
absolutely.
that's it. I just I just
I think
don't
that's
like.
fantastic,
I don't
really.
feel good about that.
Yeah, of course. I mean, the thing I disagree with the most is that you said that you sleep. Um, no, you don't. How do you possibly do this? How can you? I mean, every night you must be feeling as if like there's something that you missed. But then actually, what you're saying is saying, look, if I don't get that scoop, I don't get that scoop. Now it's okay.
Yeah, I
That
I
must have
it,
not
it,
always been
it
the way,
wasn't.
though.
Listen, there are stories like Evan Drellick is a wonderful friend of mine, and Ken Rosenthal, I consider him a mentor and a paragon, and everything I do now is because I tried to copy him. He's really, really, really good. He will be in the Hall of Fame one day. He will go down in the annals, best baseball writers of all time. He changed the way that this sport and sports in general are covered. Like him, Adrian Wojnarowski, Adam Schefter, they were pioneers in that. And, you know, I love what I do to the point where I just do it for 20 hours a day. And that's, you know, like
that's it.
I have learned that my body can function relatively well on a minimal amount of sleep. I know it's probably not great for my long-term prognosis. I'm trying to work on that, and
it's a bell curve.
Trying to, the whole like, hey, let's catch up with one day. Nah, it kind of doesn't work like that. But as long as my brain continues to function okay, and I'm not making stupid or careless or reckless mistakes, then I'm gonna try and keep going. I feel like my career will be much more of the Koufax Andrew Jones. Let's go really hard for like a decade than going out there for 20 years, and it's going to be hot and fast, and then it will go away.
Well, it's been incredible so far, and we're really excited for what's ahead. And really, I just have two more questions because, of course, we're getting just over the top of the hour here, and I really can't appreciate you enough for coming on to this. It's just such an exciting thing to, this is a major baseball event, and of course, we have to have the major baseball scoop artist himself with the Passan bomb, Jeff Passan. Two questions. One, what is your end game? Because as you're saying, you can't do this forever.
I have no idea.
Is it removing yourself from baseball? Is it doing something else in the baseball world? Is it just still reporting? What is it for you?
I don't think I can ever remove myself from baseball. I've done this for 20 years now. It's a part of the fabric of who I am. I've sat there and thought, I wonder if I covered the NFL at some point, what would that be like?
Don't do that. Please don't ever leave us.
No, it would. I think it would be fascinating and an incredible challenge. I just don't know if I'm up for an incredible challenge like that. Like, I've been going hard for like 20 plus years at this point. And, I loved writing the arm. I loved it. I loved the process. I loved the product. I loved everything about it. So I'm waiting for a book idea to punch me in the face and say, you have to do this.
Right.
I can't right now. I just don't have the time, but at some point I will. I want to teach too. I think teaching is super cool, and I think I'd be good at it. So
absolutely.
I like that. I really enjoyed, I don't know if you ever saw Alive, which was the documentary we did on Drew Robinson. I really enjoyed doing that. And working, the director and producer, Martin Kodabashian, is brilliant. And so working with people who understand a medium that I only came to late in life and understand it better than I do and can teach me. And, maybe documentaries, maybe I'll do a podcast. And maybe there's something that I have no idea exists now or has not been created yet that I might be good at. So I don't like the job right now. It takes up so much time and bandwidth already that I almost feel like I have to focus on what I'm doing today, and in order to do it well, because if I start looking at something else, then I might fall behind where I am right now, because there are a lot of really hungry, really good reporters who do this job, and they will gladly take every scoop I'm willing to deign.
Yeah. And the last question that I ask everyone here when I do these is, we all have mantras that we live by, kind of. But we internally, like a kid, this is a thing that I need to do. You mentioned one before, like do it right, essentially. And one of mine is do it right once, which is just essentially encapsulate how it works correctly once, and then you don't forget that, right? And if you do it once correctly, then you won't have to do it again when it breaks quicker or whatever. And I'm kind of curious. I mean, outside of that one, is there something that you really feel like you hold on to as you go through this?
I look at what I try and pass on to my children who
Mm.
are 16 and 11. And they take this, genetics are really a wonderful thing because they are such different kids.
Yeah.
But it's trite, but also true. Um, and it's that effort matters most. Um, you know,
Yes.
you can be incredibly talented at something, and if you don't put in the effort, you're not going to be as good as you could or should be. You can have zero natural talent, but if you put in the effort, you're going to get better. And as long as you measure yourself, against the baseline of where you started, against the improvements that you've made personally, you can look at yourself at the end of the day, and there will never be a time where effort doesn't reap something positive as long as what you're measuring is the right thing. And so I just, I tell my kids, I don't care if you get something wrong or if you screw up, but if it's because of a lack of effort, then that is the thing that you can control, and thus the failure is on you.
Yeah, that's great. It's like my coach in college. I would say practice isn't practice. Good practice is good practice, right?
Yeah.
And that effort, as long as it's focused in the right way, not just kind of going through the motions, you've really put that effort in the physical element, but the mental focus that it needs to actually succeed. Yeah, that's fantastic. Jeff Passan, thank you so much for just making this work. I know it was a very busy morning for you, and I'm glad
That
we
it
were able
was, and
to
my
get you on.
apologies for the belatedness. But I'm glad we were able to sneak in a good 40 minutes here. And for the panelists at 2 o'clock, my apologies for being long winded. Tends to
Well,
be.
it's Eric Longenhagen and Kimball Crossley, two fantastic people. So I'm sure you'll see them and you can apologize in person shortly.
Eric is fantastic, actually. Eric,
Uh,
Eric truly,
so,
Eric truly is fantastic.
but Jeff, really, thank you so much for being a part of PitchCon. And yeah, we're looking forward to whatever those phone calls were.
Thank you so much for having me, Nick, and everyone who's watching now and will be watching later. Thank you for your support here. All of us truly appreciate it.